international correspondent Goa Zoo, Elena Kefalogianni of GUSBJ, audio host Nadine Bourne, and special guest Nick Roberts with Kildare Media, right now on OTP News, Washington.
Good day, and thank you for joining us. I'm Samantha Jill Anderson, and this is the inaugural episode of On the Pulse Daily News.
And I'm Ani Kasparian. Under normal circumstances, this show would have featured these amazing guests in a bright and lively enclosed space. A gathering of our staff and production crew would have been assembled to produce this brand new show. But that isn't the case. By our tape air, experts expect that the United States will have surpassed 200,000 coronavirus deaths and millions more positive diagnoses of this disease. With this in mind, our first special edition will cover the issues of student journalism and education in the age of COVID-19. With us today is the former president of ISU's Transfer Student Organization, Nick Roberts. He also was the editor of ISU's literary magazine entitled Euphemism. Nick is also an author and poet who produced his first book, Killdeer, just under a year ago. Nick, welcome to the broadcast.
How's it going?
So, Nick, could you tell us about your experience on ISU's campus, especially during the pandemic? How has your school been handling the coronavirus?
Yeah, so at Illinois State University, I am currently actually taking a semester or two off from classes due to the fact that COVID is extremely bad at Illinois State University. So, a recent article published by Central Illinois Proud indicated that about 1,300 students have tested positive at ISU as of 9/19. So the current standing is there's about 932 negative cases, 35 positive cases with a 3.6 positivity rate. But if you want to look at our total numbers, there's 1,414 total positive, 6,981 negative, and 8,395 total tested. So that just shows you just a little bit of statistic about exactly what's going on. So yeah, that's a little bit of what's going on. So basically, at ISU, there's 10% of the classes are in person right now, and they're either in person or they're hybrid courses. So that means that they meet like maybe once a week in like a studio or something like that. And just other things as well. So, yeah, that's just a little bit about some numbers and things going on at ISU right now.
Thank you for that. So, your university has actually caught national news attention when the Nelk Boys, a Canadian YouTuber group, hosted a party on your college campus, bringing in a large number of people together. The number clearly violated the rules of the town that stated no more gatherings of more than 10 people at a time. Tell me, what do you know exactly about this party, and were you there yourself?
Yeah, this has been making news like all. I know an article published by BuzzFeed talked about it a little bit. It's under YouTube is demonetizing popular frat channel Nelk Boys, and that's the title of the article. So on September 9th, the Nelk Boys came to ISU, attracting crowds of like, I think it was 70 or 80 or maybe even 100 students at one of our largest and most expensive apartment complexes. And they're actually monetized on YouTube. So what the university is doing now in order to sort of handle this situation is they are potentially suspending and fining every single student that can be identified or that had any sort of connection to the event. And it was just I remember watching the videos. There was absolutely no mess in sight. lots of alcohol, lots of drug use, some potential drug use possibly, and it was just a very, very messy situation. And so the president of ISU is now potentially, like I said, fining and suspending students that were associated.
Okay. You've been very outspoken against all of the things that have happened at this party, and your views have been read by many people. Can you take us through the process of what you had been preaching up to this point, and up to the point where even the president of ISU, Larry Dietz, blocked you on social media, which is quite an achievement for a social media person. So tell me,
Yeah.
what do you think was the cause of this?
So that's also a really funny story. So I was very, very vocal on my social media, specifically Facebook, where I was friends with the president of ISU, Larry Dietz, on Facebook. So essentially, his Facebook page is run by a media team of students at Illinois State University. Um, and basically, 2 or 3 times every day, I would just share an article about how ISU has 600, 700, now 1,000, now 1,300, now 1,400 positive cases. And I would tag Larry Dietz in it, and I would tag Illinois State University in the post as well. And eventually, I didn't hear anything from the media intern or whoever was running his page. And I noticed one day when I tried to tag him in a post, um, his name wouldn't like necessarily pop up, and I couldn't click on it anymore. And so when I go to his page and I look through my friends list, I am no longer friends with Larry on Facebook, which is quite the achievement, I suppose, as a undergraduate. But I have been very, very vocal to my fellow students, to my fellow administrators, family, friends in the Bloomington Normal Illinois area about staying at home, following these guidelines, following what needs to happen, and in order to just flatten the curve. So we have just been like, just like dealing with so much at Illinois State right now. So we currently have, actually in 20, we had 21,039 students at ISU. So that is a pretty big number compared to some other schools in the area, besides U of I, of course. And so when we started seeing numbers in the hundreds, in the hundreds, in the hundreds, in the hundreds, and then in the thousands, things got really scary in Central Illinois. So I have been sort of practicing what I preach and staying at home, just going to my job, and being very, very aggressive, very blunt with friends that I see on social media that are going out, that are at bars, that are just doing things like that. So yeah, that's just a little bit about what's going on with me.
So practicing what you preach and staying safe doesn't seem like something that I would block you for if I was president. What do you think was the last straw for him to want to block you? What were some things that you said that maybe provoked him?
So, if I look through my Facebook, I would share things on Facebook saying, like, and it's not only me that has been putting pressure on him as a student, but a large majority of the faculty at Illinois State has been putting pressure on him as well. So, I'm in the English department at Illinois State University where I'm studying creative writing. And one of our associate professor of English, Brian Rejak, wrote a open letter to President Dietz and fellow administrators at ISU and said, quote, "You can't just explain away 1,300 cases by claiming that we test more than other schools. Because after people in the area were putting a lot of pressure on Dietz in order to get him to potentially shut safely and just see what we're saying, what we're feeling. Dietz came out with a big public statement in his state of like sort of like a State of the Union address for a president, and he said, "quote: The truth is, Many state universities don't test nearly as much as ISU and don't transparently report positive cases as ISU. Other universities test so often that their positivity rates skew lower through simple division. The ultimate fact is that coronavirus impacts Illinois universities in a similar fashion. The more students, more likely the incident of coronavirus, and creative counting and reporting does not alter that fact. So when he published his written statement and his video statement on his social media, I would simply share it and I would give him other facts about other schools. So,
Samantha?
Thank you, Ani and Nick. Just north of the U.S. border in Toronto, Canada, citizens have attempted to transition into Phase 3 coronavirus restrictions. Some have wondered what that means, and if Canada continues to have a plan on a COVID-19 response. Our correspondent, Goa Zhu, is in Toronto with more.
Hello everyone. Toronto is currently in the stage 3 of reopening shops, restaurants, and other non-essential businesses since its coronavirus lockdown in March. We are currently in the Shops at Don Mills Plaza situated in North York, where many people are taking advantage of the reopenings of shops and cafes. Now here in Toronto, stage 3 means reopening businesses, but with some safety measures be in place. As mandated by the Canadian government, cash in restaurants should be eliminated or minimized. As of August 5th, masks are now required indoors, and it's becoming more common for customers to have their temperatures taken when they enter restaurants. Big cosmetic chains such as Sephora and Beauty Boutique by Shoppers is not allowing any customers to try on makeup. Instead, they take a cotton swab and swipe it onto a white piece of paper to show people the different shades in makeup.
That was Goa Zhu live in Toronto, Ontario, just a few hours north of Washington, D.C. And she is here with us now. So Goa, what does the current COVID-19 plan look like for that area? Has one been formed yet?
Well, as of now, there is no plan yet to fully reopen, and Toronto will remain in the stage 3 of reopening. The public health officials are also preparing and stocking up on resources for the potential of a second wave of the virus this fall. For information updated every hour on the virus, I recommend to check out the website toronto.ca.
Has the area seen an increase or decrease since reopening?
There has been an increase in COVID-19 cases in the province of Ontario. Today, there has been a reported number of 407 new COVID cases, 2/3 of which are under 40 years old, but no new deaths associated with the coronavirus. Mayor Ford has said that he will reverse back a step of reopening if the cases continue to rise rapidly.
I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to ask about students in the area. Do you have any information on how students are handling the COVID-19 pandemic in that area of Canada? Any plans for schools that you are aware of?
So, according to the Health Ministry, for the province of Ontario, schools are requiring students to wear masks, wash their hands frequently, and maintain physical distancing. They are also strongly encouraging students to stay home when sick.
Thank you so much for your reporting, Goa. And thank you at home for continuing to stick with us. After the break, a research stop for the On the Pulse Washington crew. You are watching On the Pulse Washington, Student News. Thank you for sticking with us and welcome back to the program. The past few weeks have been filled with political turmoil to the detriment of one party or another. But our producers ask themselves, what student journalists around the country are saying instead. Schools and their student media outlets around the country have been fighting to ensure that their stories are heard. Their public forum has continued to inform the localities they live in. In the case of the University of North Carolina, for example, the Daily Tar Heel took headlines with its claim of a cluster F in progress on its campus. It has since reported a roughly 1 to 2 positivity rate on its campus alone. Our reporters noted that the area, while quiet for the most part, remained clustered with several noticeable gatherings of people wearing the powder blue synonymous with the university. DC area schools have brought stories to the forefront that matched the timbre of UNC's headline. Georgetown University students were dispossessed of personal items, according to the Hoyas' Casey Ferrante. Likewise, George Washington University noted that a fraternity, Delta Tau Delta, had multiple members test positive for COVID-19, according to Tiffany Garcia of The Hatchet. Across the country, stories in North Texas Daily, the Stanford Daily, the Iowa State Daily continue to cover a growing number of issues. The Daily Trojan, for example, covered the outstanding balance caused by a tuition hike at the University of Southern California. Several universities have come under fire since then, with students wondering in opinion columns and in social media posts why their institution has returned to an unsafe environment. Now, those same students are finding their stories in the local coffee shop unread. As students without homes or financial stability look to continue thriving in their educational environment, campus newsrooms have taken center stage. According to the Columbia Journalism Review's Serena Cho, in recent months, as professional newsrooms have wrestled with their own historical failures, many college papers have explored ways to better support staffers of color and improve their coverage of the underprivileged, at times by transgressing the doctrines of old school journalism. Some have apologized to readers for historically misrepresenting communities of color and pledged solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. Many have challenged the industry's misguided belief in objectivity, arguing that it exalts the perspectives of white leaders and experts. A recent statement signed by 15 college editors urged professional journalists to reflect on their long-standing bias against marginalized voices. So with the onslaught of news and the persistent coverage of a year that has yet to have an off week, we ask the news gods a single question. Why is that? After a break, our panel will discuss. We are back and our panel is joining us now. Nadine Bourne is On the Pulse Washington's podcast host. She's a current graduate student at Georgetown University's Master's in Journalism program, acting as a freelance journalist in radio and broadcasting. Elena Kefalogianni is also a master's student in Georgetown University's journalism program and the current secretary of Georgetown University's Society of Professional Journalists. He has worked with CNN Greece and has published fiction writing and several stories with CNN Greece. He is also an Onassis Scholar. Let's first discuss the coverage of issues like the coronavirus, and then we will jump to Nadine for conversations on the broader marches and civil unrest in America. Elena, in your experience, student journalists handling this properly, how have they been covering coronavirus?
So I would say that in the US, we have seen more and more students getting engaged with getting internships with media organizations and with finding or at least having some opportunities to publish their work with bigger media outside of their college campus newspaper. It is very different in Greece if we were to compare it to the States, because students who are attending university for journalism there only get chances to publish in their university's newspaper. Most of the media don't actually offer or have open places for internships. And that's mostly a funding issue, but also the fact that it's not so common for a university student to be able to work in one of the very few media outlets that we do have in my country. And as far as coronavirus in particular, Greece has been one of the countries who took it very seriously at the start with a very heavy lockdown where people couldn't actually leave their houses unless they got government permission. So the media and most professional journalism have taken a really deep dive in covering that, which has kind of left out students and opportunities for student journalism to have the same part that the professional journalists do have. And since our media are also more consolidated and in union with the government, I think that it allows for less coverage to go to people who are less experienced.
So when it comes to giving a voice to the young people, what avenues do they take? I mean, are general people reading college publications? How are young people getting their voice out?
I would say that not a lot of people are actually reading college publications. I didn't, in fact, know if it was going to be possible for me to get an internship until I ended up like contacting different media outlets myself. For example, some big ones in Greece is CNN Greece that I worked for, as well as Kathimerini, which is kind of like the biggest one, but it's not as recognizable as CNN, and so that's why I made my choice to go with CNN. But in terms of students, most of them go on social media to get reporting out. So Instagram is very big. People have their own blogs, but there's definitely not enough student journalism on bigger outlets. And in fact, I would say that you would have to have some prior experience or know some people in order to be able to get your work published in one of those big media organizations. Just because, like, again, we're very consolidated and there's a lot of union within the media, which is good. So there's not enough misinformation, but it also falls in the hands of the few more experienced journalists.
Definitely a tough situation all around. Nadine, bringing it back stateside, we know what's been going on at universities across the country with these coronavirus cases. How do you feel the student journalists have been covering what's going on their campuses in terms of cases being reported or not being reported, students being welcomed back to campus and then told they need to leave again? How do you feel about the coverage?
The coverage has definitely been mixed throughout the last month and a half. I know a lot of schools did start opening back up in late August. It's hard and it's difficult when you have a virus that's so unpredictable and you don't know who's a carrier and who's not a carrier for this. So I think in some ways, student journalists and college papers are trying to do the best that they can with updating their campuses very well. I think one thing that a lot of people, or maybe a lot of faculty members on colleges, don't really include are on-campus students versus off-campus students, and how those off-campus living students can widely affect the cases on campus as well. And that's something, nobody really talks about. And we need to be more concerned about students who are off campus, because what are their policies? Can they go and visit other friends? Can they go on campus and to visit other friends in buildings? I know at Boston University, if you live in one building and your friend lives in another dorm building, your friend can't come and visit you. That's strictly forbidden, no guest policies. So I really wonder how off-campus policies differ from that, or if they don't differ at all, and are student journalists on college campuses putting those numbers into the overall numbers as well?
I'm glad that you mentioned that. I actually remember reading from the editorial board of the Daily Tar Heel. They were basically saying, the university should have known that when students would come back, they would be reckless. They would be not necessarily following the rules, and that it was basically the university's fault for not putting more rules in place, or for basically not telling students to stay home. So how do you feel about that? Do you think it is solely the university's fault, or do you think students should have some of the liability?
No, definitely students do have a liability for that. Universities put restrictions for the safety of the students. And I think up to that point, that is the university's responsibility. Now, after that, it's up to the students on whether or not they want to follow it. So if students don't want to follow the restrictions and the rules that are set in place for specifically their safety, you might be seeing, an increase in cases. And so students definitely have to take on that responsibility of, what am I doing to ensure my safety? What am I doing to ensure the safety of the people that are also surrounding me? So if you have roommates, if you have a significant other that's on campus as well, are you really going to take that risk to go to a party, to go out and hang out with people, at a local bar if bars are open in that area, just for the sake of hanging out, knowing that there's a whole pandemic here, knowing that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have been dying already from this virus. How much of a risk is a student willing to take for that,
Nadine, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Elena will stick around for an interview with our international producer and host, Ani Kasparian, after a short break. You don't want to miss it.
And now, a special report. A new virus causes new approaches. Around the world, different countries have handled this pandemic differently. One of those countries is Greece. In April, the New York Times called Greece a country that had defied the odds in the pandemic due to its relatively low numbers across the region. Today, a special guest joins us to discuss her experience returning to her home country. Elena Kepelogianni, thank you so much for joining us once again today.
Thank you for having me.
So Elena, you as an international student at Georgetown University here in the USA saw the pandemic hit. You decided to go back to your home country, Greece. I saw you share some of your experience on your Instagram stories, which caught a lot of attention. Can you take us through what happened when you arrived in Greece to finally getting to your house?
Greece was on a very strict lockdown. You couldn't even leave your house unless you texted the government the purpose for leaving your house, and there were very specific rules. So once the airports opened up again on May 18th, everybody who got back was getting a test at the airport.
Now, what I want to ask you is when you said that you were coming off the plane and they forced tested all the citizens, you felt like it was a breach of your privacy. Now, a lot of Americans here think that wearing a mask is like a breach of their freedom. If you were the leader of Greece or any country, how would you implement something like this, but you see as more?
So the mask being a breach of privacy, I don't understand that argument at all. And being force tested, again, I didn't think that was a breach of privacy. I thought the fact that there was a cameraman filming that process was a breach of privacy. Because again, I really do support, and I know Greece is a smaller country, so it doesn't get as many visitors as the United States. So testing everybody is great, because when they stopped doing that and we opened up for the tourists, that's when the cases spiked back up on the islands. So, the testing was fine, but I just didn't understand why that part had to be filmed. And speaking of journalism, since that's what we're doing now, I do know that in public places you're allowed to film, but this was an area where we were getting tested, and I don't have knowledge of what is allowed or not, but that was certainly something that felt like a breach of privacy. When it comes to masks, masks were mandatory in Greece and people never complained about it. Obviously, yes, it's not like you're breathing the same way with or without a mask, but we're in a pandemic. And so with all respect to the people in the United States that feel like this is the breach of their privacy, but if they feel that they have the option to actually stay home and not go outside and infect other people.
Thank you so much for your time and all of your well-thought responses. They were very insightful, and I love having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for joining us for our first episode of On the Pulse Washington. You can join the conversation with our crew online at OTP Washington on socials. For now, I'm Samantha Jill Anderson.
And I'm Ani Kasparian. Please be safe, wash your hands, and wear a mask. We'll see you very soon on the Pulse News, Washington.